All righty. Well, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We do attendance?
Yes.
Clerk, will you call the roll? Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Bullets. 5 present, 1 absent. Great, thank you. All right. First up, we've got Councilmember Halliburton.
I'm just going to do things from up here. It always feels weird to go down.
Just make sure, I'm not sure if your mic is.
Oh, I'll talk close to the mic.
Great, thanks.
So we're going to be talking about mayor and city council salary updates. Everybody should have seen some information about this in the Friday memo. So hopefully it doesn't take too long, but I just wanted to kind of give a space for going over a little bit of context and see if anybody had any questions as we move forward. So a little bit of history. We set city council and mayor salaries by statute, and we do it through ordinance and with a schedule, and we do it at about 5-year period at a time. And historically, if you look back at the way that council's done this, it's usually about 3% annual base increases. And the reason why we've done 3% in the past is because that's consistent with how we budget for staff long-term. The last time that we did this was in 2019. And when we did, it was Ordinance 2-21. And that's what we did. We did 3% annual increases for mayor and salary until 2026. And so it's going to expire here pretty soon. What happened was in 2020, a pandemic hit, and we froze base increases for staff. And to make sure that we were being consistent with base increases, we went in and we amended Ordinance 2-21 down to a 0% increase for city council in 2021, and then 2% going forward after that. Luckily for our city, we emerged really well through the pandemic, and we very quickly adjusted with staff, giving them a raise in 2021 base wage, and then in 2022, a more significant one to make up for the gap year, the lack of raises that we did in 2021. What we didn't do is we never went back to look at city council or mayor salaries. And so that remained at the 0%, followed by 2% the following year. And what happened was staff ended up receiving a 3.4 average annual base increase during that period of time, that 5-year period of time. And that doesn't include any merit-based wages. And so most of our staff received more of that as well. Council at the exact same time ended up averaging about 1.67% during that period. And so what I'm wanting to do is that as we update our new ordinance, and this would come before us in a future meeting, I think in early December, we have to update the ordinance this year to reflect the salaries going forward. And my recommendation is that we align the base wage increases that we offer to general staff, or we align city council and mayor's increases with what we offer to general staff during that 5-year period of time. And that we do a 3% base adjustment year after year going forward. What that looks like is about a 6% base increase in 2026 and a 3% increase every single year for the remainder of the term. And that would put city council and the mayor directly aligned with the base increases for staff. To me, this feels like good governance. It means that we're treating every single one of our employees exactly the same way. And because we can't do year by year raises, we would be doing it for a 5-year period of time. One thing I do want to note is that this would not include any sort of back pay or pay reimbursement. In fact, by the city council and the mayor taking those cuts and that adjustment to the ordinance, it ended up being about $60,000 of savings to the city during sort of an unpredictable time. And all of that savings, still remains the savings of the city. None of that's actually incorporated or put back into the plan. So it basically just puts us in alignment going forward. So I want to pause there to see if there's any questions from council members at this point.
Madam Mayor, I do have a question in the memo, and also on the last slide. There's a line that says between 2020 and 2025, general staff received an average increase of 3.4% in base pay. Councilmember Halliburton, do you know if that's a year over year increase or is that like aggregate for the 5-year period?
So if we look at this next slide here, and I apologize, the writing is really small. What you can see in the first column is the amount based off of the ordinance for mayor and council. So you see 0%, 22222 down the line. In the column on the right, you can actually see what the increases were for staff during that same period of time. So in 2021, you see a 2%. In 2022, you see 5.9%. That's basically making up for the gap of what we didn't do the year before. 3%, 3.5, and then 3%, 3% going forward, averaging out to about 3.4% over that period of time.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
Councilmember Halliburton, thank you for putting this together. I think my guiding principle in this would be paying us consistently with general staff, provided that these increases do not exceed other employees like police and fire. So if before we consider an ordinance, if we could just get an updated memo, I don't know if from you or from the mayor's staff that show police and fire increases over the last 5 years, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure we could put that together. Fire and police are going to be much higher than what we see for general staff. So fire and police would be the one or the two departments that would actually be out of line with the rest of the staff. So when I say general staff, I should note that I'm not including those two, but this would be consistent with what we see with all the other staff employees at the city of Boise. And again, this doesn't reflect the merit increases that staff received, and it doesn't include any merit increases for council or mayor, which would be inappropriate.
Thank you for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor, sorry, one more question. So, Councilmember Halliburton, so the column on the far right is what is also proposed, right? No.
The column on the far right would have been if we would have been keeping consistent exactly with staff. The column in the middle was what our ordinance would have reflected if we had not amended it. And so what you see in that last year of 2026, those would be the wages in the right-hand column that we'd be recommending. And that's what would basically put us back with staff. And I can show you that on the next slide. So here you would see that alignment taking place in 2026, both for the mayor and for city council. And then you can see the 3% increase going forward for the rest of the scheduled years.
Councilmember Halliburton, I don't know if this is directed to you or mayor staff, but I think one thing I'd be interested in additionally putting the police and fire salaries in the increases in that memo. I'd also be interested in like other regional markets that you might consider for these types of wages for that we're looking at here. I think in like Spokane, Salt Lake, those are the regions I'd want to look at.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. We do have that information available, so we can get that to folks. I'm going to go back a couple slides because I have a couple of other recommendations here. You see here in the second paragraph, I would also recommend, and we can't do this in ordinance, so this would be internal policy, that we would do the 3% scheduled going forward, but at the end of the ordinance, when it came time to renew, my recommendation is that we would align whatever base increases we gave to staff with council and mayor going forward. There's a chance it'll be exactly 3% because that's what we budget for staff. There's a chance it could be a little bit less if we somehow ran into a circumstance like we did back in COVID. And there's maybe a chance that it could be a little bit more. I do think that council specifically moving into districts in the last couple of years may change what some of the hours, what some of the expectations are of council members. And so it would be worth council doing a deeper study into how other cities are doing some of these pay structures. But for now, since we have an ordinance that we have to pass in 2025 to go into effect in 2026, I think the best thing that we could do is make sure that we're keeping things consistent with aligning base salary increases with staff.
Madam Mayor, I think Councilmember Halliburton has a plane to catch.
All right.
Yep. And so with that, if there's no further questions, what we'll see is probably the first meeting in December, this reflected in an ordinance. It does get approved as an ordinance, so it would take 3 readings before it would end up passing. And then it doesn't actually go into effect until after next election in January when people are sworn in. So it actually doesn't affect any of us until the next election.
All right, thank you. Safe travels.
All right. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have an ARPA update. And then some of the ARPA final funds through ARPA will be on the consent agenda tonight. Mary Brown, welcome back. See ya.
All right. Madam Mayor, members of council, thanks for having me. My name is Mary Brown. I'm the city's grants manager, and I'm here to give you an update on the city's ARPA program. As you know, the city was awarded $36.9 million in federal grant funds under the U.S. Department of Treasury's State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund program, which was authorized under the American Rescue Plan Act. Eligible uses of funding included supporting the negative public health and economic impacts that families and businesses faced as a result of the pandemic, as well as maintaining vital public services, even amid declines in revenue, and building a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery through investments that support long-term growth and opportunity, such as investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. To identify the areas of greatest need, the city conducted a comprehensive community outreach effort in 2021 that included an online survey and multiple listening sessions. This community feedback shaped the city's final decision on funding priorities and allocations. Many stakeholders across the city are responsible for this program. I'm one person chairing tonight, but there have been many contributors across the organization. It's truly been a citywide effort. Specifically, Meredith Elton, the city's ARPA program manager, has led staff through the implementation of these funds. We've depended on her leadership greatly, and her dedicated support has positively impacted the entire ARPA program. Also, Chloe Ross Ronan, the Chief Administrative Officer for the Mayor's Office, was instrumental in the program's initiation and also managed the city's community-led projects throughout their first 2 years of implementation. And Kate Nelson, the Mayor's Community Partnerships Director, designed the subaward programs under ARPA, which are focused on childcare, small business support, mental health, and food security. Numerous department stakeholders, including specifically our IT, climate action, and housing and community development teams, contributed to this project, as well as stakeholders across the finance department, including the budget office, accounting, accounts payable, purchasing, treasury, and lastly, the grants division, which is a team that includes myself and 3 other members. We're particularly excited to apply best practices and lessons learned from ARPA to bring additional capacity to the city's ability to secure and manage grant funds across the organization. I wanted to provide an overview of the city's final ARPA allocation. As you can see, $15.2 million went to affordable housing and supportive services, $6.8 million to climate adaptation and infrastructure, $11.5 million to community needs, $2 million to broadband and smart technology, and $1.4 million to direct administrative costs related to administering the program. In terms of the city's projects that were led by city staff, investments in affordable housing directly supported more than 140 units of permanent supportive housing through the New Path 2.0 projects and the purchase of the Park Apartments, as well as supportive services that will be provided by Terry Riley Health Services at New Path 1.0. Investments in climate adaptation replaced geothermal lines along 10th Street will upgrade the geothermal injection well to meet additional demand, and will convert 3 city facilities from natural gas to electric heat. I'm sorry, that's the municipal building electrification project, specifically at the Boise Depot, City Hall West, and Vista Housing. And then lastly, the city's Connect Our Parks project added infrastructure for public Wi-Fi hotspots, smart technology, security cameras, and defibrillators at Ann Morrison, Julie Davis, Ivy Wild, Cecil DeAndres, and Veterans Parks. The first of the city's community-led projects was a child care incentive pay program in partnership with the Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children, which directly supported more than 1,200 child care workers and providers or facilities licensed by the city of Boise as of May 1st, 2022. The second involved direct contributions to more than 480 small businesses in Boise that experienced negative economic impact as a result of the pandemic. And then mental health programming across multiple nonprofit organizations has serviced more than 2,800 individuals and families, the majority of which are uninsured or underinsured. Food security programming led by City of Good has resulted in more than 32,000 pounds of surplus produce deliveries to local food pantries and more than 15,000 meals to children and seniors. And lastly, nonprofit assistance in the form of direct contributions to support the continuation of essential services such as childcare, mental health support, and emergency rental assistance was provided to YMCA and Jesse Tree, or will be per tonight's consent agenda. In addition to addressing critical needs in our community, the primary goal of the ARPA team throughout implementation has been adhering to the key deadlines of the program, which include the requirement that all funds are obligated by December 31st of 2024, and that all funds are fully expended against those obligations by December 31st of 2026. And with that goal in mind, we're very happy to report that our funds are 99% obligated as of today, and they are 81% spent. That means that we've spent $30 million of our initial allocation, and that staff anticipate expending the remaining $6.9 million by September 30th of 2026. As for the 1% and remaining obligations, that's what I'm hoping to introduce to you tonight. So the first is an amendment to Interfaith Sanctuary Subboard Agreement. It extends the period of performance until September 30th of 2025 and increases the budget by $463,000 from both ARPA funds and general fund dollars. And Council approved an IBC on this subboard amendment last week during Council. And it's included in tonight's consent agenda. The second agreement is a beneficiary agreement to Jesse Tree in Boise, which would include a one-time payment of $250,000 to match an investment made from the Stickle Family Matching Fund. That's also included in tonight's consent agenda. And then the last outstanding obligations will be made via purchase orders to the tune of just over $40,000 for the Connect Our Parks project before the end of the year. So with that, I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Mayor, my question is, of the remaining 19% that we have obligated but not spent, is that a single bucket? Is that several different projects? Could you talk about that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, I may have presented this in a slightly confusing way. We are 99% obligated,
Okay.
and we only have 1% in funds left to obligate before the end of December of this year.
So, Madam Mayor, my question is, of what we've obligated but not spent yet, that's still 19%.
Oh,
And my
Yes.
question is, I'm nervous about what happens after this deadline, after we pass the obligation deadline, something program doesn't work out. Where are we at? So I'd like a better idea of the obligated but not yet spent funds.
Madam Mayor, Council President Nash, I understand your question now. Staff have worked really hard to make sure that we have allocated the funds towards projects that have a very high likelihood of completion. And I would be happy to get you more details about what those remaining projects are and follow up afterwards. It is a handful of projects, one being the supportive services at Terry Riley at New Path. Some of it is the municipal building electrification project, which is on track. And I'm not recalling the others right off the top of my head.
Madam Mayor, Mary, if you could provide that as a follow-up. And then additionally, I'd be especially interested if any of those obligated programs we've not yet spent funds on. That's what I'd be particularly interested in.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, happy to provide that info.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Mary, thanks so much for this detailed presentation on the ARPA funds. It's been a wonderful program, I think, for the city, and the city's done a really great job initiating projects that have really helped our community. And yeah, like Colin, I think it'd be good to watch if we have a list of what hasn't been, understanding what's been obligated, but what hasn't been spent. So we can watch that this next year and just make sure that if need to, we could react to that. The one final question I had is on any interest earned on the funds from the ARPA dollars, if we have an accounting of that.
Hi, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Corliss, we do have, Eric, I'm going to defer to you for this one on the interest.
Well,
earned.
Councilmember, do you want to know the amount or are you just making sure that it's accounted for?
Well, I am curious on the amount.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, I don't have that number readily available, but we can certainly return with that number. We have been accounting for the interest that we have received through this program.
And if you can help remind me, will that interest have the same parameters that are wrapped around for the ARPA obligations to be obligated by the end of this calendar year?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember, I don't believe that there are the same restrictions on the interest, and we've been accounting for those interest collections within the general fund.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd appreciate if we could get that amount that's coming from there. Thank you.
Well, and Mary, will you be here for the consent agenda this evening?
Yeah, I'd be happy to be.
Oh, no, I'm just wondering if you were planning on it or not. You don't have to
I
be.
hadn't been, but I'd be
Okay,
happy
well then
to
you don't
be.
need to. So then I'm going to say now what I will say later because
wonderful.
I was otherwise going to save your time. But I really appreciate the work that went into the allocation of these dollars. And we've had for a long time a priority on affordable housing and working with you and the team. And yes, it was a team, and thanks for calling everybody out. It makes my list of notes a little bit easier because you called everybody out that I'm planned to call out. Aligning these investments that were, yes, they were designed to help our community recover from COVID. They did in many ways a lot more. And they're generational investments that we are able to make with these dollars for our residents. And the work that you and the team did to align the thinking and ultimately the investing for implementation with the values that we set as a council and the vision we have to be a city for everyone that provides affordable housing, that creates a clean and environment and resilient future, that looks at supporting organizations that meet community needs, whether it be childcare that's affordable and accessible, or food insecurity and making sure people get fed. We were able to do so much in the community with these dollars, and I appreciate all that went into that because you helped us set an example of what it means to get dollars back into the community to do what the federal government planned and really wanted to see these funds do, which is take care of people. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
And with that, we will take a break till 6 o'clock. See you all back then.